So he thought that there was a world that existed that would be a combination of both politics and business and leadership. What do I mean? He formed something called the Trilateral Commission. The Trilateral Commission is some spooky stuff. People said it was something, the Illuminati, there's some mystery about it, people that ran the world. It was politicians, but David said most countries, the politicians get elected for 4 years or 8 years, separate from the royal families in England or in the Middle East. Someone's there for 4 years and then they're not there anymore. The most important people to have stability and consistency would be businessmen. So he formed this Trilateral Commission of businessmen and politicians from 3 major continents. So it was the North Americans, the Europeans, and the Asians. So he said to me, would you like to be on the Trilateral Commission? Now, I was 30 years old, 32 years old. I said, great.
I was born in Belgium, and I now live in the United States, but I was born in Belgium. And from a very young age, I was abused at a very young age, and my mother was very mentally unwell. And I believe that we were targeted, but from the age of just around my 6th birthday, I was trafficked into what I can only call a network, which at the time involved, I didn't know who anybody was, but they turned out to be prominent politicians in Belgium, nobility, businessmen, and the elites of Belgium. It seemed that the nobility offered their castles as places where to hold the orgies. And the then Minister of National Defense was in charge for, as far as I could tell. And he was mostly using me for blackmail purposes. It's a terrorist organization, really. In the first years, from 6 to 9, and we're talking, I'm from 63, so we're talking 69 to 1972. I was mostly used for blackmail purposes. That's to say, I had to. So there would be an orgy or it'd be a party, and often it was in a castle, and then I would be waiting in a separate room, and some handler would be there with me, waiting, or with maybe some other children as well. And then when the people had left who were not supposed to be aware of this or who were not ready, whatever they were considered, that a certain later hour, then we were brought in. And I was often introduced to somebody who was supposedly new. And then I had to make them feel comfortable and then take them to a room. And then they were secretly filmed. And then that was used against them. Yeah, he was a Minister of National Defense. He became Prime Minister twice afterwards. Yeah. And that's the special club. So the Minister of National Defense, first there's the corruption and the greed. And then beyond that, there's, the people who didn't say no when they were confronted with a 6-year-old child. They were already triaged by the minister just to make sure that they were not going to say no. Because I never had anybody saying no, and I was always stunned that they were going to not say, my goodness, this is a little girl, this is a child, I'm not doing this. So they were clearly pedophiles. And in the system, to be a pedophile, you have to be very cut off, right? You can't, nobody healthy would think that a child would be used for sex. That is completely crazy. That is really sick. So there it begins. That requires you to be completely sick. And then that sickness, those in my experience, those who needed the power, they were pulled into this system, which then becomes completely psychopathic at the top levels. My mother actually had a contact person who didn't live so far. She was a countess. She was a part of Opus Dei in the group, a religious group. And so the certain tier of Opus Dei was then involved in this network. So was, when we're talking about the minister, he was a Freemason, and then a certain tier of the Freemasons were also involved in this network. And I think a lot of the people that were being brought in came through the Masons or some club, some secret society that already was secret and where there already were a lot of promises made never to speak and everything. So that by the time, they were triaged, and how much do you want it is the question, right? How much do you want the power? And whatever it is that when you lack the self-esteem, but you want the power, it's not just ambition, because ambition is connected to the self and aligned with everything you are and what you want from life. But there it is sheer ambition because you're lacking the self-esteem because of previous trauma. So you're running away from your own trauma, from your own shadows by climbing the ladder. And this is what was offered. The higher the more you want it, that's to say, the sicker you are, the more you don't have a sense of self, the more you're not connected to yourself. It begins with pedophilia, but that's already really extreme. It's extremely common. So it's also really extreme in nature, like to think that, to see a child as a sex object is crazy. All these men treated me as if I was a 6-year-old prostitute. And I knew that I wasn't. She was paid. I found that out.
Oh my God.
Yes. So it wasn't, she was driving me to the places, dropping me off, picking me up at dawn, and she got paid for it, which I found out late, accidentally, but I did, from within the network. At age 9, so now 1972, there was the Bilderberg meeting in Belgium, and that was great for the people in the network, or I call it a club at the time, it was a club with levels. So the children were sort of the ultimate level and were mostly used for blackmail, but then there were powerful people with very sadistic desires that were then also taken care of, and it linked to the royalty as well. So when I was 9, and there was a ritual that was set up to please one of the people that was coming to Belgium for the Bilderberg meeting. And so for this American billionaire, they staged a satanic ritual. And that had the elements of Satanism, with everybody wearing black robes and, and hoods. And it took place in below a cathedral, in the basement of a cathedral. It seemed that was sort of the reverse of what was happening upstairs. And so there wasn't a very old altar, a black altar, and there was a pentagram, and there were all the elements were there. And 2 children were given to this billionaire, and there was a little boy with me that I was 9 and he was 7, and he was a little bit slow. He was a little bit mentally handicapped, and so I'm sorry, I felt very protective of him, and he was killed. There were 2 children. One was to be sacrificed, and the other one was to be raped by that billionaire, by the special guest. And so I was raped, but I was also forced to watch. Because he was special, that maybe it was so pitiful, because he was crying so hard. So there was nothing to dampen, or to minimize what was happening in front of me. And it's just, yeah, a lot of very horrible things happened, but I just have, it's been so hard. David Rockefeller was a grandson of John Rockefeller, who was the first billionaire, or was the richest man on earth at one point, you know, from an oil magnate in the United States, and is one of the families who have really forged their way into public influence, especially in the United States, but really worldwide. This American billionaire, through extraordinary circumstances that really are beyond me, have nothing to do with me really, then took an interest in me. And that then landed me in what I call the global network, which was what the Belgians were very hard trying to get connected to these people, to do business with them and everything. And then the children, of course, the gift of these two children was, in that system, really the secret currency. Rockefeller was definitely a Satanist. I can't say it in any other way. That was a belief system that was adhered to by a lot of people there. I met a lot of celebrities. As I said, you know, 𝗧𝗿𝗱𝗶𝗁𝗲 was there during a week that was to celebrate a satanic holiday, which was on April 30th or May 1st, I'm not sure, but it was going towards that date. There were a lot of festivities. There were horrific things that were happening. But that's the week in which I had my performance. That's the week in which, you know, things were happening there that were satanic in nature, as well as the original, you know, the original ritual that was staged by the Belgians who didn't believe this, but who wanted to do that to do business with these people. I know that it wasn't Rockefeller who was in charge, and then I know that you know, I met somebody else who clearly was had more power than him, but I don't know who ultimately was in charge. But it is a system. I don't think it really works in and of itself, because if everything is based on blackmails, then they're not real friendships, obviously, because I was supposed to ultimately be this elite sex slave to be sold amongst them and to spy amongst them. So it's not like anybody has real friendships there. Nobody's capable of having a real friendship. So the values are completely deranged and screwed up. And I feel that because of their resources and ability to control, we're getting a lot of brainwashing to try to emulate those values. I think it's old, and I think the experiments from the Nazi camps were continued. In fact, at 9 years old, I was taken to mind control facility, actually a nice villa in Heidelberg, but the basement, mostly the basement of that villa. And so what I received there, that mind control training, was extremely precise and effective. And so there was a plan. So based on my innate ability and based on my bloodline, which I wasn't aware of myself, I was, you know, they created a persona that I was going to become for them as, you know, an elite sex slave. And to be an elite sex slave, I needed a platform myself. And so I was going to be, you know, made famous in France. And so that training was so specific and so precise, and it was done by a man who was a Nazi and who was used, I think, by this family as, you know, for their special project. I don't know exactly, but it was extremely professionally done. Like, I was impressed.
Wow.
To see myself change. And what changed there that was so significant is from 6 to 9, I knew they were wrong. When I was 9 years old and I went through a year really of intense training, and meanwhile I was gone from home the whole summer of 1972. I spent the first month July in the United States, and the second month in that training in Germany, in that mind control training. And that whole year I was taken, and then I went back to school, but I was taken out a lot, and I was taken on weekends, I was taken either more training, or I was taken to be deployed like with a man, with a politician or something. So I was used already, and I was also kept trained to become that persona, which was going to be, a known actress singer in France. And then that was used, really, that platform was really only to serve to attract a certain type of men that I was then going to be, involved with. And then I could just also bring in information and report back to who was then my owner. So it was a star training, to be used, so that I would be used to an entourage also, and I would be used to the comfort. And I was also promised a lot of comfort and a lot of physical rewards. My choreography for the lyrics was to sexualize every line and to give the double sexual meaning for every line, and then bring that into the performance. And so that was very well liked. What I see is the persona that I was supposed to become. I see adult celebrities that definitely seem to have been programmed.
Mind control training at 9 years old.
Yeah.
Why did they take you there?
When I met this billionaire, so in 1972, you had the Bilderberg meeting that happened in Belgium. So for that event, Paul van den Boeynants made sure that he probably did many things around there, but basically to please this powerful American that was there for the Bilderberg meeting, he staged a ritual.
And so why would they need to train you, though?
The mind control training, he had plans for me. And, all right, I can say something. He had me in his homes and everything to get me used to the life of the elite, so that I would know how to eat, so that I would recognize good clothes, so that I would be comfortable in these environments. And alongside that, we went to on one of the islands on the northeastern coast of the United States, and saw there, and this was a Rothschild who was there.
Rothschild.
A Rothschild, yeah.
And is this who you're talking about?
Yeah, so I'm saying we were with Evelyn the Rothschild for 1 day only. And it was clear that this billionaire, who you would think is just as powerful as this Rothschild, was not as powerful in the network as he was. And he was asking for permission to make the star that he wanted to make of me. Well, he didn't want to make me into a star. He wanted to make me into an elite sex slave, where I would become famous in France. And then with that role, I would attract the most powerful men in the world, and I would be able to spy on them for him and so forth.
Is that David Rockefeller?
I'm not saying. I can't say this. All right.
Only reason I say that is because I pulled up the list from 2012 attendees, and I went through all the guests on the right that says U.S. from the Bilderberg meeting.
Okay.
Rob, if you go a little bit lower and zoom in and you put U.S., right there, you'll see the names that shows. I know this is...
Just give me a minute. Well, I can't lie, but it's scary. Yeah, might as well. Okay, there you go.
You've never talked about this.
I've never said his name.
you hear these stories and you wonder, there's no way these people are capable of doing something like that. At what point did you know it was him?
When he died.
2017.
Yeah.
So you didn't know till 2017.
But I knew a lot, but I didn't know that it was him.
So how did you know it was him when he died in 2017? Because that was just 7 years ago.
Immediately. I knew immediately. I just saw his face. And first of all, I saw his face, and then immediately a lot of other memories came back with him.
How much time did you spend with him?
Well, I spent quite a lot of time with him in the beginning. So from 72 to 73, this training. So I spent quite a lot of time with him in the U.S. in that first month, in July of 1972, and spent time in his estate in Westchester, and also in his home in New York City, and also in his home in Maine. And on the way to Maine, on his sailboat, we stopped off at Rothschild, who had to give his permission for the persona that he wanted to make out of me. And then Rothschild invited me into the family. And I gave I had not been treated very well up until then. So suddenly I get a very nice invitation. I feel, even this training, even though there was a lot of sex training also, just let's not make any mistakes here. This is not like I was just suddenly being treated really well. I was being trained sexually as well. But it was the best I'd ever seen in my life at age 9. And when I was invited,
Meaning treatment of elites like lifestyle, wealth? Is that what you mean by treatment?
No, in the first 3 years in the network by Paul van den Boeynants, I was treated like absolute piece of dirt.
What does that mean?
I was the lowest of the low. He always treated me like, he wasn't worth the time for him to even have chewing gum on his soul or something, and he just had to pull it off and just resented having to spend any time on me. But he was selling me all over, or whatever he was doing. He was using me for blackmail for people that were supposedly new, or he was giving me to depraved aristocrats. But he didn't want to, I was treated, most of the time I was treated like I was absolute piece of dirt, like I had no value at all.
Did he himself sexually abuse you or no, Paul?
He beat me up.
But not sexually abused?
I did not get sexually abused by him. He was extremely sadistic. So he did not sexually abuse me. He abused other children, though. And I don't remember being sexually abused by him. But he and a few others that were in charge there just really would treat me like the lowest of the low. So I was used to sort of knowing that it was them, it was their fault. I knew that they treated me that way, but I know that I'm human. So I didn't really fully take it seriously. And I was kind of playing the game to survive, playing this game of whatever they needed me to do. I was doing it. And then in 1972, suddenly 3 years later, I got, treated as very special. And this treatment had a lot to do with the excitement that David Rockefeller felt over the fact that he loved being behind the scenes, creating this slave, this elite sex slave, who was going to make him millions. And I was already sold in the first year. In that year, till I gave my will to the Rothschild. And he asked specifically, will you be part of the family? And I said yes. And he asked me to say, I will give my will. And a year later, I did not give my will anymore. And that's why I'm here. That I got,
Why would Rockefeller do that if he's got billions at the time? That's a very powerful family.
He was a pedophile, first of all, and these families
Rothschild and David, or more David?
The Rothschild, I don't think, was a pedophile.
But David,
he was more powerful, but he was not a pedophile. David Rockefeller was a pedophile. There's a lot of survivors. I work with survivors. There are a lot of survivors out there of David Rockefeller, but I saw him in a certain light. And I've met one other person. Now that we named David Rockefeller, I can tell you that the place where I was taken in Germany, in Heidelberg, the doctor that was in charge there, Hans Harmsen, I have met another survivor that was also a special project of David Rockefeller. And Hans Harmsen, who was the doctor in charge there, she was there too as a special project of him, and she also came across Hans Harmsen.
Harmsen?
Hans Harmsen.
Harmsen.
Yes. There you go. There you go.
And who was he?
I think that he was in charge of the special project of David Rockefeller for the mind control training. And I know one other survivor who went through similar experiences as myself later on.
Did you ever meet him?
Meet him? Oh, yeah.
What was he like?
Horrendous.
Unpack it.
Okay. The way that you're trained in mind control training, it's based on torture. What I was used to doing as a child sex slave was to please men in some way or other, to get on their wavelength so that they wouldn't harm me, so that I could survive. With him, I never got anywhere. I never got through it at all. Most of these pedophiles you could get through in some way. There's some way in which, I could sense intuitively what I needed to do to please them. So with him, there was nothing that I could do to get through to him. It was just completely mean and vicious. And one thing that he would do is I was forced to watch certain things to learn about men's behavior, whether it was their weakness or their sexual preferences or their sexual
desires,
perversions, their sexual perversions. So we're not talking about regular sexual. We're talking about sexual perversions, to recognize those. And so I was forced to watch the films. And first I would see the man in the behavior, just his face, and then seeing it in the behavior, different things. And then I would need to guess based on a face what this person would do. And if I got it wrong, one thing that he did is he would just strangle me until I fainted. And in the fainting...
He would?
Yeah, he would, yeah. And in the fainting, he liked to strangle. And in the fainting, I would realize after a while that in these near-death experiences that my intuition was sharpening. And so it was punishment for not giving the right answer, but it was also part of the training to be able to get more intuitive and sense things without having to use your reason. And one thing he did was he would strangle me, but first he would say, 𝗧𝗿𝗱𝗶𝗁𝗱? What does this mean? And he would point at his own face, and then he would strangle me. And so his face to me means being strangled, or it did. That's how the programmation worked. So when I actually came across his photo, I felt like I was dying. And it took a long time. And I do a lot of yoga and meditation, and I had to really just go into the breathing and really, really just work through that programmation that seeing his face means you're going to die from strangulation. You're going to asphyxiate.
He wanted you to know that.
That is how programmation works in the network. that you know it and your body has a reaction. And also, it is a way to get you from A to whatever they need you to go. So if this prompt means that, and that was in Heidelberg, he wasn't there all the time. Most of the time, there were 3 handlers that were doing this.
So if you go back to that, Rob, that says right there, he was a bureaucrat in the Nazi Germany. He was responsible for proving eugenic sterilization performed on the disabled. He supported forced sterilization of the mentally handicapped and helped to carry them out to Protestant intermission institutions for which he was responsible.
David Rockefeller also was a eugenicist.